Hi everyone, this is Carly from Craig Systems. Welcome back and thank you for joining us for our sixth Security Basics Lunch and Learn. At Craig Systems, we provide tailored voice, data, and security solutions to meet your business needs today and well into the future. We've seen firsthand how cyber attacks can disrupt business operations. So we've put together this ongoing webinar series to educate our clients because the more you know about digital security, the better you can protect your customers, company, and your data. Each week we'll introduce a new topic and dive into the basics. We're joined by Shanna Upgard, Success Manager at Defendify, our strategic cybersecurity partner. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Shanna.
Thank you very much, Carly. Are you enjoying your time away? So today we are going to talk about compliance. So this is, unless you absolutely have to do some type of compliance, not usually a super fun topic. So today we're going to talk about HIPAA, CMMC, New York DFS, and PCI. Oh my. And I am Shanna Upgard, and I'm with Defendify. We are a SaaS-based cybersecurity platform based here in Portland, Maine. So the first thing that we want to talk about, most of the compliance requirements stem from the fact that organizations store so much sensitive data. So it's always very interesting to think about what constitutes sensitive data. The number one thing that I hear all the time is, well, we don't store credit cards, so I think I'm okay. If you do, then you're going to want to stay tuned for the PCI aspect of this. But the best way to determine if something is considered sensitive data is if you would be comfortable posting this information on a public-facing website for everyone to read. We always use the example of, a sales brochure or a one-page or some type of data sheet about your organization, a testimonial. Sure, that could be public-facing. You'd want that kind of information to be out there. But if the answer to that question is no, then it's sensitive and it needs to be protected. So some other examples here of sensitive data is we have personally identifiable information, also personal health information in there, company IP and trade secrets, tax documents for your company, your employees, maybe even clients, depending on your profession, bank information, wire transfer details, vendor agreements and price lists, legal documents and contracts, and customer sensitive data. So there's a lot of different types of data that we're going to talk about when we talk about some of these compliance requirements. The first step is always looking at the information that you store and determining what is sensitive, what you want to protect, and also if you're storing any of this type of information, you might be subjected to some of these compliance requirements. So the first one that we are going to talk about is HIPAA, Health Information Portability and Accountability Act. Thank goodness they just go with an acronym. So we're going to go through a who, what, and why for each of these. And again, this is just a basics. There's always a lot more to all of these pieces of compliance. But this is just a really high-level overview of each of these compliance requirements. So first and foremost, for HIPAA. HIPAA applies to all health plans, healthcare clearinghouses, and to any healthcare provider who transmits protected health information in electronic form. So if you are storing medical records in any type of way, this also includes, Medicaid and Medicare, insurers, HMOs, public health authorities. Any interesting question I had from a company the other day was like a public entity like a school or a university, if they collect or store any type of personal health information, or any company that is enrolling employees in or students into health plans. So that all those organizations require HIPAA compliance. And then also what we see is business associates. So private sector vendors, third-party companies. So if you work with these types of organizations, you may have received a business associate agreement from time to time as well. So some of the what's regarding cybersecurity. So there's a lot more to HIPAA than just the cybersecurity side of things, but just keeping a focus on our cybersecurity basics. Some of the requirements under HIPAA that fall in our wheelhouse are conducting a risk assessment. We're looking into things such as access control. How are people able to view that personal health information? Keeping logs of who has looked at that health information. Equipment disposal, because if you're getting rid of an old piece of technology, you want to make sure that any PHI has been wiped off of that. Physical safeguards, so actually protecting your location physically, designating a security official or somebody on your staff. There's also a requirement that you must periodically assess security policies and procedures. So you have to have those types of policies and plans in place, including using technology, incident response. Providing employee training is part of HIPAA, so you want to make sure that you are communicating the do's and don'ts that are associated with protecting that health information. Identifying vulnerabilities is another side of HIPAA compliance. There's a lot in there about encryption, so whether it's messaging or emails or devices, making sure that all of that information is encrypted, and then also having a clearly defined reporting process. So putting those elements in place to become HIPAA compliant. Why would you want to do that? Mainly because there are a lot of different types of HIPAA violations that could occur. There have been instances, most common violations are, sending text messages that have personal health information, mailing or emailing, not monitoring the logs of who has accessed that information, looking at patient information on a home computer or personal device, and then some other things that are covered in an assessment, like not removing access for employees that are no longer there, and then a lot of it is a lack of documentation of that HIPAA compliance. There are 4 tiers of violations. It starts as small as tier 1, which is just a lack of awareness, where somebody just didn't even know that they'd even had a violation. Fines for that start at about $100 and go up to $50,000 per violation. All of these fines top out at $1.5 million per year for these penalties. Tier 2 is that there was reasonable cause to believe that the violator knew about the rule. It's considered a lack of due diligence, and those fines range from $1,000 to $50,000 per violation. Tier 3 is that violation was performed with willful neglect, but they corrected the violation within 30 days after it was discovered. So, doing a little bit of remediation. The fines for that start at $10,000 and go up to $50,000, and then at the top tier, the violation was made with full willful neglect of the HIPAA rules, and they made no effort to correct the violation. That is a standard fine of $50,000 per violation and a maximum of 1.5. So there are also some opportunities to even have criminal penalties that come with this. There could be some jail time depending on how serious the offense is. If it's really malicious intent or for personal reasons or things like that. Some of the larger fines that we've seen, there have been fines of 5.5 million, 3.2 million. So it's a lot associated with this, as well as some reporting on HIPAA violations. So that could really be devastating for the business. If there's a public directory where you can go in and look at different offices and healthcare providers and if they've had HIPAA violations. So it does a lot from a reputational standpoint, as well as just financial obligations and penalties. And one of the other things to consider too is we talk a lot in cybersecurity about information being traded and sold on the dark web, that these cyber criminals are causing their crimes to make money. This is just a refresher from our first week about what data sells for on the dark web. And again, the dark web is not someplace that you go to with Google Chrome. You have to use a Tor browser, and there's a lot of dark things that go on there. But the information being sold, medical records, you can see, continue to top the charts. So if you are a company that stores medical records, you are a massive target for cyber attackers, because they can fetch a lot more money from those medical records than they can from just a username or password or a credit card number. There's a lot of information contained in health records, not only the personally identifiable information, but the health information, social security numbers. They can be used for medical fraud, but also other things. The first week I mentioned we saw extortion of a CEO of a company who had an undisclosed medical condition. So these are some high value items. The next cybersecurity regulation that we're going to talk about is CMMC. So the who is involved for this one is all Department of Defense contractors. So whether you are a prime or a subcontractor, if you are somewhere in that defense industrial base and you are using any classified networks that handle, process, or store federal contract information or controlled unclassified information, you'll have to achieve some level of CMMC certification in order to work on DoD contracts. There was a lot of questions of whether or not CMMC was kind of going to stall out a little bit through this pandemic, but it has been full steam ahead. This requirement not only is applicable to the primes, but any subcontractors as well. So there have been questions surrounding that. It seems like that's going to be based on the level of information that the subs actually handle rather than a CMMC level of the prime that they support. So if you fall anywhere in the DoD supply chain, I think there are about 300,000 contractors and subs in that supply chain. There are 5 levels within CMMC for cybersecurity maturity. In the past, DoD contractors were using the DFARS self-certification. The problem with that is that's like me walking into the doctor's office and saying, oh yes, I eat healthy and I exercise. But then when the doctor slaps me on a treadmill for a stress test or takes my blood panel and the results come back otherwise, there have been instances in the past where these contractors had self-assessed that they had certain precautions in place, and then upon further investigation for one reason or another, it was found that they didn't have those policies or cyber controls in place. This framework is very heavy in the NIST 800-171 framework. It also includes a few other controls, but it follows it pretty quickly. There are levels all the way from level 1, which is just some basic cyber hygiene, all the way up to level 5, which is advanced and progressive, really making sure that they're staying ahead of the cyber threats and getting all of those notifications and keeping all of that data secure. Level 5 contractors are going to be the ones that really have a lot of sensitive information, whether they're, they've got plans for things that we really want to keep secret from those nation state attackers from our first week. There are a lot of different components to CMMC. So you'll see things like incident response, awareness and training, security assessments, doing asset management, physical protection side of things. This all comes back to doing an assessment and seeing exactly where you stand. You'll notice a lot of things from HIPAA have also pop up again in CMMC, like controlling access to the information and security awareness training. There are many different practices that are included in CMMC. You'll see the most basic level, basic cybersecurity hygiene has 17 different practices. And then as you go up through each level, that is the number of additional processes that are included. So to go from level 1 to level 2, you've got 55 more controls for practices and 2 for processes. So this is a big one that's still continuing to unfold. There are a lot of questions about this and a lot of details that are coming out. The biggest difference with CMMC over DFARS in the past is that now an auditor actually has to come out and certify you up to a certain level of compliance. So it's no longer just a self-assessment, it's a stress test and a blood panel, making sure that you are actually doing those things that you require for whatever level it is. The big thing with CMMC is that right now, in order to get these government contracts, they put out this request for proposal, RFP, And if you bid on it and if you win it, then it's your contract. Going forward, beginning the end of this year, it could start as early as and phased over the next few years. These new RFPs that are coming out are going to have a certain level of compliance listed in one of two sections of the RFP, saying that before you can even have the opportunity to bid on this job, you have to meet CMMC level 3. So for a lot of organizations, they could have had a government contract for many, many, many years, year in and year out, and if they don't meet that certain level of standards, they're not even going to be able to bid and qualify for that contract award that they may have had for a long time. For some smaller manufacturers, these DoD contracts make up a huge portion of their business that they do every day. So not being able to even submit a bid for that contract would be pretty devastating for them. So there's a lot going on around CMMC. It continues to change and unfold, but that's one of the ones that we are definitely looking at and monitoring. My friends at Craig Systems are based in New York, so this is one that I specifically wanted to include in this presentation. This is the New York Department of Financial Services Cybersecurity Regulation, or as it's also known as 23 NYCRR Part 500. I like New York DFS better. So this applies to banks, lenders, mortgage companies, insurance companies, service providers, check cashers, sales finance companies, basically any company that is required to operate under a license, registration, charter, certificate, permit, accreditation, or similar authorization under banking law, insurance law, or financial services law. There are limited exceptions to this DFS regulation. Very high-level organizations that employ less than 10 people, produce less than $5 million gross revenue annually from the New York operations for the last 3 years, or hold less than 10 million in year-end total assets are exempt from certain requirements of the regulation. So this is one that if you fall into one of these groups on the right-hand side, you'll definitely want to look in further. And even if you are one of the organizations that is exempt from certain requirements, you do still have to fill out some paperwork claiming that exemption. So it's not just a I'm exempt, I don't have to do anything type situation. So make sure that you're really taking a look at that legislation. There's some great FAQs on the New York DFS regulation website. So make sure that you are checking those out. Some of the components of this regulation are that organizations are required to use multi-factor authentication. So if you missed that, that was in our week topic for password health. So making sure that you're receiving a separate text code or TOTP app to log into certain applications. Another requirement is to conduct a security risk assessment. So very common theme across all of these regulations. You want to have written policies. So having incident response plans as well as written documented cybersecurity policies or written information security plans. User training and awareness, again, common theme across all 3 of these regulations so far. And then also ongoing penetration testing and vulnerability scanning. So our recommended frequency on that is penetration testing annually and vulnerability scanning monthly. But the New York DFS regulations are slightly more lenient on the vulnerability scanning, but if you're going to be scanning, you might as well do it every month. So as you can see across all 3 of these so far, very common requirements consistent across all of them. The penalties, so this new regulation came through with an effective date in early March of 2017. There was a 180-day grace period to become compliant, and then there are some phase-in transitions for other provisions. There is a component of the New York DFS regulation about vendor risk management. So that piece was delayed a little bit as far as implementation. But most of the regulations had to be complied with by the middle of 2017. It did get extended a little bit for filing notices of exemption, but we are well within the first certifications of compliance and all of the paperwork that is needed to be submitted for this regulation. So we're right in the thick of this one. The penalties on this have been a little bit vague. It talks about all penalties pursuant to the New York banking law. So that can be up to $2,500 per day during which those violations continue. If there is just blatant reckless practice or misconduct, it can be up to $15,000 per day. A knowing and willful violation can be up to $75,000. So this is really up to the New York banking law and the superintendent of that to determine the penalties on this. And then the last topic that we're going to talk about today is the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, or PCI DSS. Most of the time this is just shortened to PCI. So the PCI compliance applies to any organization regardless of size or number of transactions that accepts, transmits, or stores any cardholder data. So one of the common questions that we hear about this one is companies will ask us, my company doesn't store credit card data, so PCI compliance wouldn't apply to us, right? Or we're using third-party services or things like that. So if you accept credit cards or debit cards as a form of payment, PCI compliance applies to you. The storage is risky, so if you don't store it, then becoming more secure and compliant is easier. But there are 12 general data security requirements that apply to all merchants, regardless of their size or volume. Beyond that, there are 4 different levels of compliance depending on how many annual transactions that you do, from a very small amount up to a very, very large amount. So some of the requirements here are quarterly vulnerability scans, password requirements, which we like to cover in technology and data use policies, risk assessments, again, awareness and training, and response planning. So very consistent across all of these regulations. The penalties for PCI noncompliance, the payment brand, so this was something that was put together. All of the major credit card issuers came together and formed this council to regulate certain parts of the credit card industry. So that's what it means when it says the payment brands. So they may at their discretion fine for PCI compliance violations. That fine amount can vary based on the number of transactions, but also there are possibilities where organizations could lose their merchant accounts over PCI violations. So even being able to accept or process credit cards is a penalty that can come from noncompliance with PCI regulations. So we've seen a lot of commonalities here with these different cybersecurity regulations and compliance requirements. Most of them, as you saw, have a requirement of a cybersecurity assessment. We've talked all the last 6 weeks it's been about our cybersecurity essentials package that you can get through my friends at Craig Systems. In this cybersecurity assessment tool, this is something that's included in that essentials package. There are color-coded control mappings on the side of each question in this questionnaire. So if you are a healthcare provider and you are following HIPAA compliance, all you have to do is, as you go down through this self-assessment, is follow the pink dots down the right-hand side of the screen. If you see that red exclamation point and a remediation recommendation, and there's a corresponding pink dot to that, that means that that is a requirement for HIPAA. For any manufacturers that may be watching this, you're very closely following that NIST 800-171 framework. So this cybersecurity health checkup assessment tool, you'd follow the light blue dots all the way down through there. So this is a great resource to help you very quickly see where you might fall with compliance. It doesn't take into account all of the components of HIPAA compliance, so it's not meant to specifically be used as a compliance tool, but from a cybersecurity standpoint, we'll highlight some areas of weakness for you. We also talked about having a incident response plan, and this covers everything from being hit with ransomware and malware to even something like a lost or stolen device or a loss of personally identifiable information or any type of data breach. One of the things that we see a lot with HIPAA is pertaining to lost and stolen devices. A lot of the times people in the healthcare industry are traveling a lot for work. So a phone or a tablet or a laptop can be a prime target for theft because those people can have a lot of access to personal health information. So if a device is lost or stolen, it can be a direct violation of HIPAA. So it's really important to have a formal process there in place. Also some other solutions like mobile device management to wipe a device in case it goes missing. Another component that we saw pop up was vulnerability scanning, so making sure that you are checking your networks for vulnerabilities. You can do that on the outside of the network or as well as on the inside of the network. We have a whole session about vulnerability scanning and patches and updates. If you missed that one, you can learn a little bit more about both vulnerability scanning as well as ethical hacking. You want to make sure that anything internet facing in your organization is protecting it, finding out how an attacker could gain access to your network or your applications by going past your firewalls or other types of protections, and seeing exactly how far into the network they can get, whether or not they're able to extract any information back out, be able to fix those before the bad actors can find it. Ongoing awareness and training was a huge component of all of our compliance requirements. So that is not only staying up to date on cybersecurity threats, receiving things like ongoing awareness videos, doing annual cybersecurity training, which next week we're going to talk all about ongoing awareness and versus annual cybersecurity training. Also conducting phishing simulations, training and testing your team to see if they would be likely to fall for an attack or give up any type of sensitive information. And if that seems a little overwhelming for you, the good news is all of those solutions that I just showed you are available in one SaaS-based cybersecurity platform. That is what we call Defendify. So it's simple to use, easy to support online all the time. And if you want to get started with just a very basic cybersecurity platform with 3 modules that pack way more punch than the price tag there, which is free, then we have our cybersecurity health checkup tool. So that assessment, if you are following any of those compliance requirements, HIPAA, looking at CMMC, do yourself a favor and conduct that cybersecurity health checkup. It takes under an hour to complete. It will save the answers along the way. If you're like me and whatever you start, you get interrupted and pulled in a million different directions. So you can go back and check those answers. Our network vulnerability scanning, so we talked about that being a requirement for most of those compliance frameworks. So run an external network vulnerability scan, see where you stand, if you have any holes, and also threat alerts. Stay up to date on all those different types of attacks that could be targeting your business, phishing attacks, patches, updates. So if you are interested in signing up for that free essentials package, again, no strings attached, get set up and use all of those modules for as long as you would like with no obligation. And then as always, next week we will be back again. Today's topic was compliance. So next week we are talking about annual cybersecurity training versus ongoing awareness. I can't wait to talk about this because I love our ongoing awareness training program. In fact, when I get off of this call right now, I'm going to be watching my monthly awareness video from Ningio, so I can't wait to see what the topic is this month. And then our last session that we have is going to be some of the less sexy stuff around cybersecurity. So some policies, some plans, and a little hodgepodge of everything else. So every Thursday we're here at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you guys for joining us for this session. Any questions, please email my friends over at Craig Systems. Mike and Carly and the rest of the team would be happy to help you out. And if you are interested in signing up for your own Defendify Essentials platform and the sales and the support and service that goes along with that, please call or email over there. And with that, I will see everybody next week. Any questions, please feel free to email us or toss them in the chat.